I am really, really happy to welcome back our friend, Tony Agnesi. He is a gifted storyteller, author, blogger, and speaker. He's also a Hall of Fame broadcaster and award-winning author and blogger. His first book was The Storyteller's Guide to a Grace-Filled Life, and he talked with us about that back in February, and you can actually go back and view that recording. It was wonderful, and it was so popular that we asked him to come back, and he is an incredibly busy man, but he made time for us, and we're delighted. He is married to Diane for 46 years, and they live in Ohio, as we were just talking about, and he's an Indians fan, we just found out. They have 2 adult sons, 2 beautiful daughters-in-law, and 2 grandsons who he loves to talk about, Nico and Luca. Love of their lives. They're good grandparents, Tony and Diane. We are so happy to welcome you back. Thank you so much for coming back.
Mary Ellen, thank you so much. I had such a great time in February at the conference there. I'm in awe of those that can homeschool their kids, and with all that's going on, in the country, it's just amazing that people are able to do that, and I just think it's a wonderful thing, and the people that are involved with it, I just applaud, and as I said, I'm in awe of those that homeschool.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the support. We really do. Your writing and your gifts are kind of the kind of thing that homeschooling mothers really respond to, because you're a storyteller, and we are all about the books and the stories and preserving the collective memory and spending time with our families and telling stories and learning lessons through stories. Homeschooling mothers really are all about that. So having you is really kind of inspiring us when you talk about storytelling and how you've turned it into really your lifestyle. It really is inspiring to homeschooling mothers. So you've written a new book, Storyteller's Guide to Joyful Service. No,
that's it.
That's it.
Turning Your Misery into Ministry is the subtitle.
And that's wonderful. What led you to this particular theme of this book?
Well, the observation that I've had over the years is that your ministry begins where your misery has been. So for many people, we all have hard times. We all go through hard times, and the Lord promises us in Corinthians that we'll make it through those hard times. And at the other end of those hard times, if we utilize the redemptive suffering that we've had to go through, and we look at it, it leads us then into a mission or a ministry. The couple with an autistic child, generally speaking, will be the ones raising money for autism. The woman visiting a cancer patient at the hospital is a cancer survivor. The guy giving a homeless man a pair of boots on the bridge was once homeless himself. The family serving a holiday, Easter, Christmas meal to a needy family were once needy themselves and had that happen to them. And so what has happened is these people have taken their misery and they've turned it into a ministry. They've taken their collective suffering and they've made of it a ministry. The best drug counselors I know are former drug addicts and so forth. I had a couple of interviews that I've done. One was with an old friend, Tina, and she interviewed me on local radio. And Tina and her husband, when they went on their honeymoon, went to Fiji. What a wonderful place to go on a honeymoon. Wow. And they got involved with the Blue Water Project, bringing clean, fresh water into the islands there, including Fiji. And she's been an advocate of that for a few years. She now has a couple of kids, and both of her kids have food allergies. And after the interview, when we finished the interview, we were sitting in the studio, and she said to me, "Tony, I'm confused. Can you help me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, we've been involved with this pure water thing, but I have 2 kids with food allergies, and I'd really like to switch my attention to that." And I said, "That's perfect, because who to better help people understand how to deal with kids with food allergies, how to raise money for research and so forth with food allergies." And she just this past weekend they did a walk up in Cleveland, Ohio for kids with food allergies, raised a considerable amount of money. And so she and her husband have taken this that they have to deal with on a daily basis, and they've turned it into a misery. A young guy that I worked with, Scott, a while back, had got married and had his first son, and his second child was born with Down syndrome. And so all of the things of dealing with the Down's child. Right now, he heads up one of the largest organizations in Michigan, raising funds for kids with Down. So these are examples of people that have taken their misery and turned it into a mission, and taken that mission and made it a ministry. That's what's happened in my life. I've had the last rites 3 times, Mary Ellen. I'm almost like a cat. But yes, I'm still here, and in each instance, I've been able to turn that into something important. Back in February, I told a story about the Community Pregnancy Center, and they needed formula. And I went and took a check from a speaking engagement and bought 6 cases of formula, 5 cases of Similac, 1 case of Infamil. And when I delivered it to this little pregnancy center, there was a woman, the director was sitting with the girl, interviewing her, and her baby could only have Infamil, and I had a case. And I brought it to the young lady's car, and I heard the director say, "Our problem is solved. An angel has dropped off some formula." And, I've been called lots of things, but angel had never been one of them, and that they're mostly negative. And so that stuck with me. An angel has dropped it off. So I began in my involvement 20-some years ago with the Community Pregnancy Center in Barberton, Ohio. It was in a little house. Now it's in a beautiful 5,000 square foot facility. We have ultrasound for free. We have free pregnancy testing. We even started a men's ministry. Oftentimes what happens is a guy, single father, he'll just drop his girlfriend off at the pregnancy center and sit in the parking lot. We go grab him and bring him in and talk about things like fatherhood and so forth. My wife was on the board of directors for almost 10 years of the pregnancy center, and she ran the Christmas room one year, and I decided that I wanted to buy some coats and kids' coats. I had an aunt, my Aunt Antoinette, we called her Aunt J, who worked in a laundry and dry cleaner for 90 cents an hour, and every year she bought 5 winter coats for my sister and I and my 3 cousins whose parents had passed away and who she was raising. So she bought 5 winter coats for us on her 90-cent an hour job, and I decided it was time to pay Aunt Jay's kindness forward. So my wife read at a local Penny's outlet that they had coats for sale at a very reasonable price, and we jumped in the car and we went there, and the coats were really nice, and I started loading coats into 2 shopping carts and filled up a couple of shopping carts with coats. And the checkout lines were huge. They were long, everybody buying things and checking out. But as I wheeled these 2 carts down the aisle, a cashier opened up a brand new checkout, and she motioned for me to come over. So I went over with my 2 carts, and as soon as I got there, I noticed that she had been crying and that she was pregnant. And so she asked me, "Who are these coats for?" And I said, "Well, they're for the pregnancy center, for those people that need coats, and we're bringing them there." "What's the pregnancy center?" And I shared with her what the pregnancy center did, and she began crying again and said, "I'm single and I'm pregnant. My boyfriend left town. My parents kicked me out of the house. I'm living in a 1-room rental. I have this part-time job to cover it. I have nothing for my child." And my wife heard that, and she immediately pulled out a card and she wrote down a phone number and said, "Call this number," and so forth. And we were able to get her a layette and a crib and a car seat and all the things she needed. And we also got her a coat for herself. And so that trip to Penny's, 2 things happened there. First of all, I was paying it forward for my dear aunt, but more importantly, God had an appointment for me. I had a God appointment with this young woman, and had the opportunity to take what had become her misery and be able to help her get through that through an organization that I was involved with. I didn't do any of the work. I just put them together, right? And I've been with the pregnancy center doing that ever since.
That's amazing.
And so that's the kind of thing that you do.
Yeah, and a lot of it is being open to hearing the Holy Spirit in your life, to being open to that call, and realizing that even though God is speaking to you when He says, "Oh, we're going to repay Aunt Jay and we're going to do a little coat thing," to just get in the car and go do it. It's the Holy Spirit calling you. Come on, Tony, get in the car, go do it. And we all have that.
Yeah, back in February, I talked about a little prayer that I pray every morning when I receive the Eucharist, and it's, Lord, make me an instrument, put somebody in front of me today that you can help through me. It's just saying, I'm checking in for duty, God, and I've got my antenna up, and I'm saying, Lord, tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it for you. It's a great prayer. It happens all the time. It works pretty consistently, and so that's it. Just putting yourself open to the Holy Spirit and those bumps, those nudges, those little bumps that we get from the Lord that tell us to do something. I mentioned in February, you get that nudge to maybe call an old friend, an old girlfriend, or somebody, an old neighbor, and you don't do it. But whenever you do it, what's the first thing they say? Oh gosh, I was just thinking of you, Mary Ellen. So great that you called. And it's that God nudge that tells us to do that. I when I don't go to Mass in the morning, because I've got something going on, I go to a noon Mass at a church in downtown Akron, St. Bernard's. It's a huge church, about 1,000 seats. But like most people, I have my own seat. Do you have your own seat, or your family? So here I am at a noon Mass on let's say a Monday, and place holds 1,000 people. There are maybe 40 people there. And I walk in, and guess what? There's somebody in my seat. Now, I got kind of upset. Well, of all these seats, why is she sitting in my seat? And I thought maybe it was a student from up the hill at the university, maybe hadn't studied for a test and was in there praying God to help her get a good grade. But as I got closer to my row and I slipped into the row, I noticed she was a little bit older, she's probably in her mid-30s, and I could tell immediately that she was homeless. And I smiled at her, and she smiled at me, and the Mass started, and she didn't have a hymnal, and I kind of took mine, and I shared it with her, and it was obvious that she wasn't Catholic and probably hadn't been in a church very often. And I went to communion, and she sat, and we came back, and when the Mass ended, she said, "Sir, can I share something with you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I'm homeless." And she said, "I owe $50 at the courthouse next door, and I have to be there in about an hour to pay this bill, and I didn't have the money. All I had was bus fare to get downtown." And I walked to the court, and on my way to the court was this church. And she said, "I walked in to pray for a miracle." And I said, "Oh." And she said, "You see that elderly woman down there in the gray hair?" I said, "Yes." She saw me crying in the pew, and she came up to me and asked what was wrong. And I told her that I had to pay this $50 fine and I didn't have the money. And she said the elderly woman took out her checkbook and wrote a check to the courts for $50. And she flashed the check, and the elderly woman's name started with Judge. And so she got her miracle. And as I acknowledged that and started to leave, she stopped me again, and she said, "I haven't eaten in 3 days. Can you help me?" And it was one of those days I didn't have any cash on me, Mary Ellen, and I said, "Well, the university has a little dining place right down the hill from the church, and I think there's an ATM machine there. Come with me, we'll walk together." And we walked together down to this place, and certainly there was an ATM machine. It happened to be my bank. And I got her lunch, and I got her enough money for the day and enough money to travel back. And as we made our way back up the hill to go to the courthouse, she burst into tears, and she turned and gave me the biggest hug. And she said, "I walked into church today for the first time hoping for a miracle, and I got 2. And so we said goodbye, and as I made my way up the hill, I turned to her again. And she smiled, and I said, "Just next time, don't sit in there."
Oh my gosh.
You see, she got 2 miracles. I will tell you, I've been to that church a number of times since then, and this girl who had never been in a church before is sitting in the pews at the 12:10.
Amazing. We are all open to being God's miracle for somebody, and it's just a matter of recognizing those opportunities. I go to 6:30 a.m. Mass on Fridays, and it was the first Friday in Lent last year, And I did the same thing. I pull up in the dark and I go in, and first of all, somebody was in my parking spot, and then I go in and
Wow.
somebody's in my seat. And I just sat there and went, "Urgh." And then I thought, okay, it's Lent. I'm being called to suffer. So when you said that, I really get that. You have that moment of, this could turn my whole day around. And you were open to that. Holy Spirit, God put that lady in your seat so you could meet her and have this be this miracle for her. And we all have to be aware of that.
Some people might say that's a coincidence, Mary Ellen. I don't think it was a coincidence. As a matter of fact, I woke up that morning and something said to me, go to Mass at noon today. Don't go this morning. I don't know what that prompt was, but I did, it. And that's how it worked out. Another one of the ministries I work with, I've been working in jail ministry for 14 years, and I go to the jail on Tuesday nights, and I meet with 4 different groups, and I meet with women and men. And one of the things that I've seen in 14 years is we have gone from a number of things like drunk driving and marijuana charges, and 80% of the people I see on a Tuesday night are heroin addicts, and there's such a heroin epidemic in this country. And one of the girls I met in jail was a girl named Buffy. And when I first met her, she had just been arrested on a heroin charge, and she looked terrible. Her hair was all disheveled, and her eyes were sunken. Her complexion was ruddy, and just a mess. And she was in jail for about 10 months, and every time I saw her, she looked a little different, a little better. Her eyes cleared, her complexion cleared. She was taking better care of her health. She was combing her hair, and she was an attractive young woman. She's probably in her mid-30s. And as we got close to the time that she was going to be released, I met with her, and she said, "I have nowhere to go. I have nowhere to go. I have no family, nobody here in this part of the country." And I said, "We got to get with the counselors. We have to get with the chaplain here, and we have to try to find you a halfway house or a place you can go to." And she promised that she was going to talk to the chaplain and talk to some people and see if she could get into a halfway house. And I said goodbye. She gave me the biggest hug, and we said goodbye. And about 2 weeks later, we had a meeting of our jail ministry team, and one of the women that I work with, Connie, said, "Did you hear about Buffy?" And I said, "No." And she said, "They released Buffy on Thursday, and she died of an overdose on Sunday." And I felt like such a failure. Did I fail her? Did we fail her? Did the system fail her? Did the courts fail her? And the answer to that question is there's enough blame to go around. In the county that jail is in, there are 11 beds for women. 11 beds. There are 62 animal shelters in that county.
Gosh.
But there are only 11 beds for women. And so we've got a lot of work to do with this epidemic of heroin addiction. And Buffy is just one example of those types of things that happen.
It's kind of indicative of the culture that we worry more about dogs and cats than we do about people and their needs. It's so frustrating. Tony, you've picked some challenging ministries to work with and to be part of. I know you work obviously with the incarcerated and your pro-life work and with the homeless. What led you to choose each of these ministries? Was there a particular thing, or did you just fall into it?
I didn't choose them. They chose me. God chose me to do them. The jail ministry is something that dates back a while. There was, as a matter of fact, I've got a full book that I'm working on that hopefully will come out in 2020 on a young man. His name is João. He was an orphan in Brazil, had no family, lived in an orphanage all of his life, and at age 8 he was adopted by a couple from my hometown here in Wadsworth, and he came here and he integrated very very quickly, and he spoke very little English, but he learned English quickly. As a matter of fact, long since forgot Portuguese, And I had an opportunity to coach him in soccer. He's a really nifty little soccer player, and I coached a lot of youth soccer back then, and I had a chance to work with him and coach him. My oldest son, who's 40, they were best buddies and hung out together and so forth, and so I knew him very well. And after high school, he got involved with the wrong crowd and was arrested on a marijuana charge. And the feeling back then in our country was that if a foreign person was arrested on a marijuana or on any drug charge, that they would be deported. And what I found was that his parents, when they adopted him, decided, probably wrongfully in hindsight, that they would let him wait till he was an adult and decide whether or not he wanted to be an American. And so he was not an American citizen. And immigration began proceedings to deport him back to Brazil, a country that he knew very little about, left when he was 8, doesn't speak the language, had no family then as an orphan, and certainly had no one to return to. And he spent a long time in jail systems and immigration courts and so forth. And I used to visit him, and I would go see him, and we would sit across from each other, and we talk about Jesus, and we talk about God getting you through your hard times. And a year and a half later, after we appealed all over the place to senators and congressmen and governors, he was deported to Brazil, where he was murdered on the streets of Sao Paulo. And so the laws have changed as a result of that. Now when you adopt a foreign child, immediately when the papers are signed, that child's an American citizen. And it's a story, I think, that's very important today with all that's going on with immigration around the country and all that we talk about. But from that point on, I said that I was going to try to work with, I couldn't work with him any longer, but I would try to work with other young men and women who were good people but just made bad choices in their lives. So many people that I meet in the jails are really good people. They're just like your kids or my kids. They just have made a bad choice. And what we help them do is make better choices and improve their batting average. And so that's how I got involved with jail ministry, and I've been doing it for 14 years.
That's wonderful. And that really speaks to what you're writing about in this book, of taking your misery of the loss of this young man who was so important to you and turning it into a ministry where now you're affecting the lives of all these other young people who, for a couple of minutes of bad judgment have gotten their lives completely off track. So
that's exactly what happens, is that many of these kids we see, especially that are addicted to heroin, I mean, many of them came to heroin through prescription drugs. A guy is a heavy equipment operator. He hurts his back on the job, and he can't work, but he goes to the doctor, and the doctor scripts him up for Oxycontin. He takes 1 pill a morning, 5 mornings a week, and he can go off to work and support his family and make a living and bring home a paycheck. And when that script runs out, and it does, he looks to buy Oxy on the street, and it's very expensive. Heroin's very cheap. And so the next thing you know, he's doing heroin, and he's hooked and arrested and in jail. And the addictive illness, it's no different than being a diabetic or being whatever. He's got this addiction.
We tend
problem.
to look at addicts in a way that they've somehow, that they're weak or they've failed or they've done something, and very often it's just a situation like that where a person just falls into something badly because of a bad situation, and it's a tragedy, and they need help, and they need sympathy and empathy, and nobody wakes up in the morning saying, oh, today I think I'll just turn myself into a heroin addict or a drunk or whatever it is. It's just one of those things that happens to people. They spiral into a bad place, and so turning what that experience for that young man into a place where you can help other people. I think we can all look at places in our lives where we've had bad things happen to us, we've suffered, and then you try to turn it around and minister to the people because you've walked the walk. You know what they're going through, and that makes it unique.
Turning your misery into ministry is basically, you've been there, done that. You walk the walk, and now you take that experience and you turn it into a positive. You turn it into something for the glory of God, right? In the kingdom of heaven. And that's basically what we do. Understand that there's nothing special about me. Probably the least special guy going. I told you earlier, Mary Ellen, I'm a 1.9 GPA in college. I'm not proud of that, but that's a fact. I'm a storyteller, but I'm not a story writer downer. I was told that I wrote at a sixth grade level and would never write above that when I was in my first freshman year of college. There were 4 freshman years I had of college. The closest I came to a 4.0 was my blood alcohol level, during college, and I tried to keep that above my GPA. That's why I was such a lousy student. But what I decided that I was going to do is take these stories and share them so that my grandsons would know that Grandma and Grandpa were followers of Jesus Christ, that we had a true faith that kept our marriage alive and vibrant for all these many years. We met in high school. We were born on the same day in the same hospital, a couple of years apart, and we were high school sweethearts, and we've been together now 46 years, 50 counting the time we spent dating, and so 52 actually counting the time we spent dating. So I just really want people to know that all you have to do is be open to what the Lord is putting in front of you, and that little prayer, Lord, make me an instrument. Put somebody in front of me today that you can help through me. And then when you get those little bumps and nudges and shoves from the Lord, act upon them. Don't just put them aside. We all get those. I don't think there's anyone watching this today who hasn't had the Lord give them a little nudge. And many times we don't act upon them. And when we do, we can be an absolute blessing to the people around us.
I know as a mom, a busy mom, and maybe some of the other moms will chime in, that we get those nudges, but first we have to scrub the toilet, or we have to, we have to grade the math paper or something like that, and we kind of put it on the back shelf where, the toilet's always going to be there and it's going to be dirty in 10 minutes again anyway. So listen to the Holy Spirit. When you said that, make me an instrument, moms, we have our little people in front of us right there. So we have to be there present for them. They are our ministry right now, especially when you have very young children. And you can constantly be called to be an instrument for them too. And by that, being open to the Holy Spirit, it kind of shines out from your home and into the world when you take the kids out to the homeschooling thing or to church or to the grocery store or anything like that. You can really reflect God's love just by having your ministry be your children and being open to those little nudges and sometimes saying, all right, the nudges, let's take the kids to the park. Oh, but the kitchen floor is sticky. Well, it'll be sticky later. You can mop it later. Take the kids to the park because God probably has a plan for you there.
Yep, time is all we have, and how we spend our time is very, very important. And I just read a piece yesterday, as a matter of fact. We waste about 11 hours a week on social media and those types of things, email and so forth. 11 hours a week. I wrote a piece a while back, Mary Ellen. It's in one of the 2 books. It's called "The Myth of Quality Time." And I can remember as a guy in my 30s, we always thought, well, I try to give my children some quality time. Well, you know what that is an excuse for not giving them the quantity of time that they need. The average kid spends about 30 minutes a week with mom and about 15 minutes a week with dad. And they polled 2,500 first graders and they said, what's the one thing you want more of? And you know what they said? More time with mom and dad. And so sometimes we think that quality time is important, but it's not. The best time we spend with our kids is the time we just at the spur of the moment go to the zoo instead of cleaning the toilet. And that time, creates these, Kodak memories that we'll always have. And sometimes we just have to be open to the fact that, the carpet may need sweeping or the toilet may need clean, but I've got a more important task to do, and that's spend some not only quality time, but the quantity of time that I spend. Some of the greatest memories I have of my kids, who are now grown adults with their own kids, but some of the best memories I have are little things that happen just, in day-to-day life, not anything special. We seek out the extraordinary when God's grace is in the ordinary, and we need to do that. Well, what can we do? One of the things that I've always done with my family, my youngest son in California with the 2 children, he and his wife have done this as well. We always have dinner together. As a family, we sit down as a family and have dinner. Oftentimes in families, 2018 style, mom has dinner after dad finishes, then he goes off and the kids come in and they have soccer practice and cheerleader and whatever they're doing. And it's such a disjointed thing. Now we stop everything we're doing. We sit down together. We leave the cell phones at the door. They're not at the table. And we talk about what we did today. This is one of the reasons I love homeschooling, because you're engaged with your kids and you're talking about things. And we cut out some of the non-essential stuff. And also make a little time for prayer. These are the things that bind us together. These are we don't think of it as quality time like going to Disney World, but we remember these things, these small little incidents that happen in the ordinary travels of the day. If we just forget the myth that quality, I'll spend some time with my kids on the weekend. Or I was at a vacation spot and there was a guy in the pool with his kids and he had his Bluetooth microphone on, as if while he's in the pool, as if he's got to be at the ready in case somebody calls him. And I'm saying, well, what you're basically saying is that call that might come in is more important than playing with your 2 kids in the pool, and that just is not the way it should be. So that quality time versus quantity time, I think it's really important. I go off to California and I see my grandsons, and a while back I spent some time with my youngest grandson, and I held him in my arms and fed him his bottle, and after a while I could feel our hearts beating kind of in the same rhythm, and it was a relaxing, wonderful time. And I remember his toothy, slobbery smile and his 4-year-old brother's beautiful smile. And when I get back home, I realized that, that's why we're called to be like children in the Bible. It tells that Jesus says we must become like children. Well, what is it about children that is so attractive? Well, there are a few things. The first thing is kids live in the present. Whatever they're doing right now is what they're doing, right? And they forgot that they were crying. Once they get a new toy, they forgot they were crying a half hour ago, and they're concentrating again. They live in the moment. They live in the present. Too often adults either live in the past, which causes depression, rehashing the same old stories, or they live in the future, which causes anxiety, where they're so worried about what might happen tomorrow that they forget to live today. So kids live in the present. One of the other things I noticed observing is that kids have unconditional love. They love mom. They love dad. They love grandma and grandpa. They love their toys. They love their friends. They love their school. They love everything. They have unconditional love. And then third, they're humble and meek. They operate with a bit of humility. They rely on mom and dad. They trust that if something bad is going to happen, that mom and dad will be there for them. They live in simplicity. You get them a new toy, they end up playing with the box. It's just a simple thing.
One of our viewers, Stephanie, just shared, it's known as the responsibility of the present moment.
Oh, wow, I love that. What a great story. By the way, I will steal that. Stephanie.
Yes, Stephanie, we'll all take it.
The last observation I had is that kids are full of awe. It just amazes me what impresses them. The right flavor of popsicle impresses them. Something they do in the pool with the squirt gun, shooting water into it impresses them. They are such of awe of everything around them. In the book Eat, Pray, Love, there's a scene where a woman is looking out over this beautiful landscape in Tuscany, and she says, "How beautiful, I have to come back here to see this someday." And the gal she's with says, You're here now. Enjoy it now. You don't have to come back with somebody else. You have me here with you. Let's enjoy it now. Let's be in awe of it now. So I think it's important that we try to kind of become like children and appreciate things in front of us. Live in the present. Show unconditional love. Be humble. Be meek. Live in simplicity and be full of awe. That's why I appreciate what young couples have to go through. I mean, my daughter-in-law, with two and a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, I couldn't do that. That's why young people have kids, because it is a tough situation, and it takes up every waking moment and all of your attention to do that. That's why I love, I always say, I love when babies cry at Mass. There are a lot of people get all upset. Oh, why don't they take their kid and they're crying at Mass and I'm trying to pray. If we don't have babies crying at Mass, then our faith is in trouble. We need young families who have to go, they have to get them dressed, and they have to get them in the car seat, and they have to get the diaper bag, and they got to have the obligatory thing of Cheerios, and they got to have 3 or 4 picture books and some crayons, and all of that just to go to Mass. I am in awe of what they have to go through to bring their kids to Mass. When I hear a kid crying at Mass, it's like angels singing to me, because I know that our faith has a future.
Yeah, it's true. I hate it when people get cranky about children in Mass. It drives me nuts. Come sit by me, everybody. It's fine. I don't mind. Now we're getting some nice comments. Mignon, I probably pronounced that incorrectly, was saying that this is just what she needed to hear. There seems to be a preponderance of websites for homeschooling moms that focus on being better homemakers and all that kind of stuff, instead of the message to look for God's nudges. And those things are not always on our schedule, which is true. The nudges aren't always on the schedule.
No. I as a businessman, and I've been a broadcast executive for many, many years, I used to literally schedule my calendar in 15-minute blocks, here to here to here to here, and always running 30 minutes behind today, or he's 15 minutes behind. And what I find now is that I can't do that, that I have to leave some time for the Lord to direct where I'm going. That doesn't mean that I don't get as much done as I did. I do, but I schedule it, things a little bit differently. There are times when I stop whatever I'm doing to do something else, and I think we all should be open to that. I think did I share my story in February about hepatitis at all, Mary Ellen? Did I share that?
I don't think you did. No, that doesn't sound familiar.
Well, I'll share it with you. I had cancer surgery 12 and a half years ago, colon cancer, and by the grace of God, I've been cancer-free for 12 and a half years. And one of the things that came as a result of that is a year later I was diagnosed with hepatitis C. Now they call it the silent killer because it attacks your liver, causes sclerosis, liver cancer, and all sorts of things. We tried to track down when I got it. A lot of baby boomers my age, a lot of the people born in the 50s and so forth, they say 1 in 20 has it. It could happen from a bad haircut by a barber back then, or a blood transfusion that you got at a younger age, or it could happen by playing, Tonto and the Lone Ranger and doing a little blood brother, we're blood brothers that we did back in the 50s. Or it could have happened as a result of the surgery, or it could have happened as a result of a needle, a prick, or whatever that happened during the surgery. But in any case, I had it, and it was diagnosed. So I went to the best hepatitis doctor probably in the country, one of the top guys in the country at the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospital, I should say, and they did some gene testing, and my particular gene type does not do well with the protocols that existed. It had only about a 20% cure rate, and I asked what he thought I should do, and we decided I should wait, that something might be on the horizon. And if you watch a little television a year or two ago, you heard about a drug called Harvoni. Harvoni was the cure for hepatitis, and it happened to work best with my gene type, had about a 99.7% cure rate. So I was a prime candidate for Harvoni. So I applied for it through my insurance, and I was turned down. And I applied a second time and was turned down. And then we did another battery of tests, and the doctor's office really tried to help me. And we submitted a third time, and we were turned down again for the third time. And about the time I was ready to give up, one of the women from the doctor's office said, "No, we're going to resubmit this. I'm going to do some things differently. I'm going to add some tests." I filled out a questionnaire. I did a number of things. And on the day after New Year's in 2015, I received a letter from the insurance company that I was approved for Harvoni. And the insurance company was going to pay 80%. I would pay 20%. Harvoni costs $93,000. It's $1,100 a pill, and you take one pill a day for 90 days. $93,000 is what it costs. It was only going to cost me a mere $18,000 for her. And so I had to think long and hard about $18,000. And finally, I got a call again from the same woman at the doctor's office, and she said, "I want you to call this woman at the company that makes the drug. They're doing a trial, and you might qualify." And I called her, and I did qualify for the trial, and they paid everything except $38.
Oh my gosh.
So I can't begin to tell you how fast I wrote that $38
I can imagine.
Pretty quick.
Wow.
I began taking the drug, and 90 days later, there was no sign of hepatitis, and they wait an additional 3 months, and you do additional blood work. And if the hepatitis is gone, they consider that a cure. And so I had the blood work, and I drove an hour to this doctor's office at a hospital, a suburban hospital, and they put me in the little room, and I waited for him to come in. And he walked into the room. Now, he doesn't have a lot of bedside manner, I'll tell you that up front, but he walked in the room, and he leaned against the counter, and he said, "Tony, you're a busy man, and I'm a busy man. You're cured." And he turned and walked out of the room and left me there in tears. And the entire way I drove from that office to my own office, my work office, that hour drive, I cried the entire way home, thanking the Lord for this cure. And as I got off the exit and pulled up to the street where my office is, I noticed at the drugstore right in front of me, there was an elderly black man sitting on the sidewalk, leaned up against the drugstore. And I got a bump, a nudge, to go talk to him. And so I pulled off the road and pulled into the parking lot of the drugstore. And I went up to this elderly man and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No." He said, "I have a heart condition and I have a prescription and it's keeping me alive, but I don't have the money to have this prescription filled. I have no family. I have nobody to give me the money. I've been sitting here begging for someone to help me for the last few hours and nobody will help me." And I said, "Do you have the prescription with you?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And I helped him to his feet and I took him inside the drugstore and we filled his prescription and I paid for it, $38.
Oh, wow.
Exactly what my treatment cost. So here I am, $93,000 worth of drugs cost me $38 because I have insurance, because I have a great job, because I had an amazing hospital, amazing doctor, amazing nurses and staff who worked on my behalf to make that happen. And here's a man sitting on the sidewalk, leaned up against a drugstore. He has no job, he has no money, he has no family. He has no means to get $38 to stay alive, to get his heart medicine. And for the want of that same $38, his life is in jeopardy. And that's when you know you're going to work with the homeless, right? That's when you know you're going to turn that misery into ministry. And I've done so ever since.
That's amazing. While you were speaking, I realized that I had heard that story before, and I'm so glad that you shared it again, because it's one of those things that we need to hear, that God puts you where you're needed most, and to always be listening to that call. Irene shares that it's the openness to the movement of the Holy Spirit in according with the will and providence of God. And we just have to train ourselves to be open to that nudge, to rely on God to put us where we need to be for the $38 that's needed for the person in the church in the pew, for the person on the playground, and not be afraid to step out in faith and say, what do you need? How can I help? Where do you need to be at? That kind of thing. It's a little bit scary, especially if you're kind of an introverted person, but to put yourself out there and trust that God is going to use you for great things, for great things.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, miraculous things. A lot of them are everyday things. Just being there for someone, just having a shoulder, someone to talk to, someone to listen with. I was driving back from that conference we talked about earlier, the Catholic Writers Guild and the Catholic Marketing Association Marketing Network conference. And on the way back, I got a phone call from a very close friend, actually a cousin, and her 30-year-old son had died of a heroin overdose, and she wasn't doing very well. And I had a chance to spend some time with her, and we had calling hours and so forth. And I hugged her at the funeral home, and she hugged me back, and she whispered in my ear. She said, "You were here when my mom died, hugging me, and now you're here for my son." And it's just a small thing. I had already driven, 6 hours to get back from Pennsylvania. It required another couple hours of driving, but it was worth the time. You see. I just got a thing today. A woman wrote me this morning on Facebook. She did an instant messenger and saying, "I'm going into surgery. Tony, would you pray for me?" And I get that all the time. And I responded immediately that I would have her in my prayers. I'd remember her at Mass and so forth. And I got a reply back from her that says, "I'm so glad you took the time to answer my email. You took the time." Sometimes just taking the time to do something. I can remember when my dad passed away, a guy flew all the way from Chicago to come to the funeral. Most people wouldn't take the time to drive an hour,
showing up,
but he did. The woman whose son is involved in an accident, and it's an hour away, and you jump in the car and you go to the hospital to hold her hand and help her through a tough time. Most people wouldn't take the time to do that, but she did. She took the time. He did. He took the time. You see, when we get to that last judgment and Jesus separates us, I hope that he says to me, "Welcome to heaven, because you took the time to help my people." And that's what we all are called to do. To have that opportunity to, take the time to send a thank you note. Take the time to send a sympathy card. Take the time to even send an email. I mean, it's so easy these days to just do something to take the time to help someone. And for every one of the people that are viewing this, be that person. Be the one that does that. One is a very important number, and we can be that one person who takes a little extra time. That one person who, as busy as you are today, stops whatever you're doing and spends 20 minutes on the phone with a friend who's in need. That's the person that takes the time, and you'll be so glad when somebody said, nobody did it, but she did. She came. She took the call. She talked to me. She shared. She visited me in the hospital. She came to the nursing home. And so forth. She came to the jail, the prison. She visited me on the streets, whatever
wonderful.
that might
Thank
be.
Thank you so much, Tony. We are actually a little over time, but it's well, we're both chatty, so and it's fine. I want to thank you so much for joining us again. This has been again so inspiring and so so much speaks to the heart of what homeschooling mothers are trying to do in their homes and in their families and in their ministries. It's been wonderful. Please check Tony's website out. There's a link in the comments, and if you use the code HomeSchool, you'll get a 10% discount on his book, which he signs. I've ordered one. I'm getting one, and the last one was wonderful, and I've shared it with a bunch of people, so I want you to do that. Check that out. His whole wonderful spirit just shines through in his writing, so it's something that's definitely worth your time to buy and read through and share with your family. So thank you so much for this, Tony. I hope we have you again in a future webinar. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been wonderful. And again, I'm in awe of those that homeschool. I wish God bless every one of you as you enter into a new school year, and that